case anyone wants to come back to this. And they were watching Back to the Future. I don't know if any of you saw it. And they were talking about how actually some of the scenes in it, they don't sort of hold up so well over time. There's quite a few problematic scenes in Back to the Future, but I love that film. We're actually going to see the musical in the autumn. Right, The Gentleman. Oh, that's on my list. That's on my list. I think that's on Prime. Howl's Moving Castle. Thank you, Shannon. Godfather Part 2. Oh, Part 2. Okay. So very specific there. Interstellar. Some great films on here, guys. 1917, because of how they shot it. Oh, interesting. Reasons too. Fabulous. So what is it particularly about the way that it was shot, Jamie? I've not seen that yet. I've heard it's absolutely brilliant. Hi Megan, don't worry. Favourite film, Breakfast Club? Yes, classic. John Hughes films of the 80s are really interesting to look at. 500 Days of Summer, Lady Bird. Oh, I love those too. Thank you. I don't really have a favourite, but I love things that are based on true stories. The Abduction of Lisa McVeigh. Right, okay, yes. Perhaps sometimes you can find those more powerful when they're based on true stories. Midsummer, thank you, Serena. Well, that's brilliant, guys. Thank you. So I hope you can hear me okay, because I haven't got any fancy headphones or anything like that. So the purpose of today's session is just to talk to you a little bit about what to expect from A-level, and hopefully persuade you, if you were kind of, you know, in two minds, that this is the subject for you. It's not ideal to do it this way, and there are certain clips that we felt we would normally show in school, but we felt perhaps in an online lesson it might be a little bit dodgy if you've got younger children about or whatever. So it's not ideal doing it like this, but if you've got any questions, please do ask. You should be able to unmute yourself. I think I've set it up so that you can unmute yourself at any point, or just put into the chat if you're more comfortable with that. Okay, if you can't hear me, like, let me know in the chat as well. I'm used to people saying that. Okay, so welcome. This session runs till about midday, and then if you've got any questions at the end, you can email me. So some of you in the chat, have any of you done GCSE film? Maybe just yeses if you have. It's a bit slow. Okay, perhaps not then. So what you need to know, there's two exams that you will do at the end of the 2 years, because it's an A-level course. Okay, each of those are 35%. Oh, okay. Oh, you didn't get the option. I didn't know that, Megan. Oh, that's gutting. Okay, thank you. So 2 exams, 35% each, and then NEA, which stands for non-exam assessment, if you weren't sure. So coursework, basically, that's 30%. So 20% production and then 10% evaluation. And over the 2-year course, you will study 11 films. Okay, I'm going to take myself off camera now because, like, nobody needs that. Let's be honest, right? Okay. So, film language. Some of you will be familiar with this. Some of you not so much, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you are coming at this with a lot of experience or no experience and just a love of film. Okay, so the kinds of things that we will talk about and the words that will be bandied around every lesson. So lighting, sound, setting, performance, framing, costume, props, and mise en scène. Okay, that's missing an E off there, I do apologise. Mise en scène, which translates to what's in the frame. Okay, so it's a nice quote on the side there that you can see as well. It's not a real image, it's really an image. Okay, so studying film as an art form, really. Okay. Okay, so there are core study areas. So for every film that you look at over the 2-year course, there are these what we call core study areas. So you will look at the key elements of film. So that includes cinematography. So that's shot types, camera angles. Mise en scène includes setting, props, costume, etc. Editing, sound, and we will also look at performance. Okay, so that's something, if anyone did do GCSE, you didn't really look at that at GCSE, that's something that we'll discuss each lesson as well. Okay, so that's key elements of film form. And we might refer to those as micro features. Okay, then we take all that and then we look at the meaning and response. Okay, so we discuss the connotations of the setting, for example, or their costume. Okay, we look at how people and places are represented. Okay, so we might look at gender, ethnicity. We also, there's a very important word called aesthetic, or the aesthetics. So that's basically how a film looks, its overall look. And you will know, because you all sound to me like film fans, that certain directors have a very particular style and look to their films that you could probably pick out from other directors. Okay? And then finally, we're also looking at context. So the social context, the cultural context, the political context, okay? Historical, so what was going on at the time the film was made, or what part of history a film is trying to portray. We'll look at the institutional context, and that means their production, basically. So the production companies, whether it's a mainstream, independent film, how it's been funded, all the pre-production process. So I'm biased, but it's really very interesting. And then you also have some specialist study areas. For certain films, you'll have specialist study areas. So you can see those in the little green box at the bottom. Okay. I'm not going to tell you what each one of those is right now, because otherwise I think it will I'll bore you to tears by me talking at you. But you can see, I think, the jump in kind of the academic rigor from GCSE to A level, okay, and some of the theories that we look at, but they are really, really very interesting, okay. So currently, if you look at the films on the specification, in yellow, you can see highlighted the films that we are currently studying. Now, this might change when you start the course. We might decide to like mix things up a little bit. So I think it was you, Alex. Did you say your favourite film was Inception? So you can see in the mainstream American film unit that Inception is on the list there. Currently, we do La La Land. Okay, so this is component 1, and this is called Varieties of Film and Filmmaking. So we look at Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock, and we compare it with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, directed by Milos Forman. Okay, we then look at an independent American film compared with a mainstream. So currently we're looking at Beast of the Southern Wild, comparing it with La La Land. Okay, and then there's a British film unit. So we need to talk about Kevin, directed by Anne Ramsey. And this is England, directed by Shane Meadows. I don't know if any of you are familiar with those films. Any of them jumping out at you as films you know? Or perhaps it's films on the specification that you think, oh, I love that film. I'll just give you a minute to have a little look at the titles. Okay. Okay, so that's component 1. And this is component 2, which is global filmmaking perspectives. So you look at a European film, global film, documentary film, silent cinema, and an experimental film. And again, the ones highlighted in yellow are the ones that we currently study. That's not to say that couldn't change. Okay, and sometimes we get a class and we get a feel for a class and we think, actually, I think this film would work better with this bunch, you know? So it's not set in stone, but it's just to give you some idea. So currently, Pan's Labyrinth, Wild Tales, but I've also taught City of God, if any of you are familiar with that. Documentary film, we look at Amy. Silent cinema, we look at Buster Keaton. And experimental film, Pulp Fiction, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Okay. So those are the 2 exam units. So some brilliant films on there. And then we come to production. So the final 30% of your overall grade, okay, is one production piece and an evaluative analysis. So that can be a screenplay or a short film. Okay, so a short film is 4 to 5 minutes, or your screenplay that would be up to 1,800 words. Okay, right, I'll just take the camera off a minute. So that's just a little overview of what the course consists of. Okay, do you have any questions at the moment? And I'll type that in the chat in case anyone's struggling to hear me. Sorry, that should have been plural. Questions? Plural. Okay. So, because this is a little bit of a sales pitch really for the subject. But what I will say is I think what's wonderful about this course is the balance between the analytical work and the creative. So having the opportunity to do both of those things in a course is quite rare. To actually study all of this body of work and then go out and put everything that you've learned into practice with your own piece of creative work is really quite a special thing, I think. Okay, so Anastasia, don't worry if you're a little late. So basically, I've just given an overview of the course. So there are 2 components. Component 1, which is called Varieties of Film and Filmmaking. Component 2, which is Global Filmmaking. Okay, and finally, Production, which is your coursework, which makes up the final 30% of the course. Okay, I'm not sure how long these teams stay open. I can put this PowerPoint up onto the team. I'm not sure if you'll have access to it for very long, but I'll certainly put this up so you can have a little look. Do you need to write essays? No, for the production, you will need to write an evaluative analysis. Okay, so it won't be an essay, but obviously with the other 2 units, they are essay type responses when you're in the exam. So these are both exam units, and then production is a piece of creative work with like a written analysis. Does that answer your question, Anastasia? Yeah. Yeah, it's all good. Fantastic. Okay. So films as we know them and recognise them today. I'm going to turn my camera off again. Okay, I've had another good question, so let me go back. So the questions in the exam will tend to be focused on these core study areas and the specialist study areas. So, for example, how do let's say if it's narrative, let me just see if I've got one on here. They are usually linked to meaning and response. So how is, in the two films you've studied, how is editing used to shape the audience's response? Okay, or it might be a question about how the narrative of the film is structured to get across a particular idea to the audience. Okay, so sometimes they're statements and you have to sort of explore those statements. But yeah, you'll be writing sort of essay style responses just as you will in probably most of the other A-level options. Okay, I can try and just get some examples up on the screen at the end of the session as well, if anyone wants to see those. Okay, right. So, in the chat then, I'll come off there for a moment. So in the chat, major inventions that have created film, okay, and what kind of developments have occurred that impact the kind of films that you see today. Any ideas? Put them in the chat. Great start, Serena. Okay, keep them coming. I'm just going to get up another screen for you. Okay, I'm just going to mute myself for a moment so you're not annoyed with my tapping, and then I'll come back to the chat. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Okay, let's have a look at the chat here. Right, let me go back. Green screens, special effects, cameras that capture color, CGI, sound, the synchronized, yes. Yeah, the camera itself. Think how far the technology has come, it's quite mind-boggling, really. Blue screen, dolly cameras, Metascope. Brilliant. Right. What I'm going to do, she says, I'm just going to see if I can just share my. Okay. Can you just confirm for me, because it's been a while since I've used Teams, can you just confirm that you can now just see like a document? So you should be able to see something that says Hollywood 1930 to 1990. Fabulous. Yeah. Okay, it's all coming back to me now, how to use Teams. I forget very quickly if I don't use something. Right, so you were asking sorts of questions. So this is an example from the Hollywood section. So this currently, students are comparing the film Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And the specialist subject area is something called auteur, which is something we'll look at. I'm not going to talk to you about it now. But you often have like a statement. So for example, here, the director is always the most important influence on a film. Compare how far your two chosen films support this statement. Okay, so you would answer that question, showing your understanding of auteur theory, which I don't expect you to know anything about right now, but then you would make close reference to your focus films. Okay, let me go to the other unit, just to give you a little bit of a flavour. So section B is American film. Explore some of the reasons why spectators may respond in very different ways to the same character. Refer in detail to at least one character from each of your chosen films. So that's basically about spectatorship and the reasons why we respond in different ways, what the director is trying to do in terms of managing our response. Really interesting. I hope I'm selling it. And then I'll just go to the final section, which is British film. Okay. How useful has an ideological critical approach been in studying the narrative of each of your two chosen films? Okay, so they might all feel a little bit scary right now. Okay, but actually they're really not as difficult as you think. Okay, it will all make perfect sense. But I hope that just gives you a little bit of a flavour. Right, okay. So going back then, so that's absolutely fantastic in terms of you recognising all the developments that we've had in the technology in that time since 1895. Okay, so well over 100 years. So this is a very, very brief timeline that you can see for yourself. So first moving images, excuse me, 1895. From 1895 to 1927, development of silent cinema. Okay, so this was the foundations of filmmaking. The principles of lighting, continuity editing, location shooting, more concentration on the mise en scène, so what's in the frame, everything that the viewer can see. Okay, from the 1920s, this is a really interesting period in Hollywood. We had something called a vertically integrated industry, and that meant that the studios, the 5 major studios, which you can see on the slide, basically controlled all elements of production. So pre-production, the production itself, actually making it, and then they controlled the distribution. They owned the cinemas that the films were shown in. Okay, so really heavy control from the studios from the 1920s onwards. 1927, The Jazz Singer, the first feature film with a soundtrack. Somebody definitely mentioned sound. Okay. 1935, the Technicolor Corporation's first feature length, 3-strip colour film. And there are lots of videos out there about how like the 3-strip Technicolor process worked. If you're quite techie, you'll probably understand it a little bit better than I do, but it's really interesting. Now in 1948, Paramount Court case prevented studios from owning all phases of the production, distribution and exhibition process. That's what's known as vertical integration. Okay, so that meant that from the 1950s onwards, independent film productions and agents had more freedom to distribute and exhibit their films. And then, of course, in the 1950s, television came along. So cinema had to kind of up its game. So emergence of widescreen, 3D. And if you think about it now, what with the pandemic and everything, even before the pandemic, cinemas were having a little bit of a crisis in terms of home cinemas are so epic now. How are we going to get people actually out theatres? And you think about sort of the IMAX and those trying to make it as an experience. That's exactly what they were trying to do in the 1950s. It's kind of like history sort of repeating itself, really. Okay, so in the late 50s, lightweight, more affordable cameras were produced. Okay, so that meant more documentary filmmaking. Okay, a new generation of directors in France, known as the French New Wave directors. The 1970s, Steadicam technology developed. Okay, so, well, it is what it says it is, Steadicam. So think about the impact of that. And then from the 1990s onwards, more and more CGI. Okay. So a move away from film special effects to visual effects created digitally in post-production. Okay. So if you think now, I mean, the reliance on CGI for certain genre films, you wouldn't expect anything else, really, would you? Okay, so that's just a little kind of overview. So what we're going to do, so we haven't got long actually, 15 minutes. We're going to have a look at a couple of scenes. So one from Buster Keaton's film called 1 Week from the 1920s, and one from the original Toy Story, which in itself is pretty old now. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. I think it was late 90s, wasn't it? Okay, so let's just have a look. Can you put into the chat if you can't hear, please? Because I should have sorted the audio out, but if you can't hear, can you let me know? Okay, we're going to take it from about 20 minutes. And I'm just going to pause that. Okay, can you see the screen? And I'll monitor the chat. Let me know if you can't hear it. Hopefully you can. Right, okay. So I hope you, I don't know, for some of you, it might be the first time that you're seeing silent film. So let me just, oh, I'm sorry, I should have resumed it. Oh, there we go, that's me in tech. Right, now we're going to have a look at this clip from Toy Story. Right, some people are saying they can't hear. Can they not hear the Toy Story one? Oh, right, hang on. Okay, you should be able to hear now.
Rockets explode! Should've held on longer.
Look, it's Woody and Buzz coming up fast!
Take cover! Ah! This is the part where we blow up!
Not today!
Ah! Hey, Buzz! You're flying!
This isn't flying, this is falling with style.
To infinity and beyond! Buzz, we missed the truck!
We're not aiming for the truck.
Hey, wow!
What is it?
Woody! Buzz!
Oh, great, you found them. Where were they?
Here in the car!
See? Now, what'd I tell you? Right where you left them.
Right. Okay. Sorry.
What do you want from me? What do you want?
That's just scary. Right. So sorry if you didn't have sound for the Buster Keaton one, but it doesn't really matter because it is a silent film. There was just music. But that's annoying all the same. Okay, right, resume. Yay, click the right button. Okay, so we haven't got time to watch them again, unfortunately. I can't believe how quickly the time's gone. But in terms of what you noticed, anything about the camera angles, well, sound you couldn't hear, so you can't comment on that. The editing, so you know, did you notice anything about like a particular shot type and then what it cuts to? And then the mise en scène, like the setting, the costume, anything that's in the frame as you were watching. Anything you noticed, pop it into the chat. So anything to do with the camera, editing, sound, mise en scène. Okay, yeah, speeding up. So the use of close-up shots. Yeah, to show what in particular? What are the close-up shots for? From the first person view to the third person. Yeah, the expressions, the emotions. And actually that's not changed very much. Were there any sort of major differences that struck you between the 1920 and, let's say for argument's sake, the 1990 Toy Story? So 70 years apart, but were they wildly different? Yeah, so you've obviously got the features of the silent film with the text cards. Absolutely, yeah. So in the silent film, it's the gags and everything are reliant on that physical comedy, that physical performance, and the visual gags, because you can't do any of that with dialogue. Whereas now in a comedy film, much of it will come from sort of the banter, the dialogue, the pacing of the dialogue. There's a lot of films that still rely on those visual gags. Okay. So the positioning of the camera with the Buster Keaton one, yeah. In terms of obviously you didn't see all of the Buster Keaton, but you obviously got a sense of what was going on, like disaster after disaster. In terms of the storyline, any differences? Or actually, a better question, similarities. Because the differences are quite obvious. One, they're trying to move their house, and one, they're trying to get back to Andy. But what are the similarities? Okay. Well, what strikes me when I watch those two things is actually the way that the text changed, obviously, and the look, but the essence of it is really quite similar. Yeah, they both use physical humor, importance of possessions, but yeah, great response. They're both quite early examples of film. You're absolutely right, because Toy Story is one of Pixar's earliest features, isn't it? Acting wise, one of the characters seems very more flamboyant than the other. She was more realistic, but they're both trying to. It's kind of like a race against time, isn't it? They're both trying to save someone, or they're on a bit of a sort of like a rescue mission. And one thing I think that is interesting is obviously the technology's changed and how they look visually, the aesthetics of film. But often the key kind of storylines haven't changed that much. Okay. And this is what I always used to yak on about with like Shakespeare, is that okay, we might struggle with the language, but the themes, the ideas of exploring the human condition don't actually change very much. Okay, so the sort of stock characters and the journeys that they go on are still recognizable. Okay, hope that makes sense. Right, it is nearly 12 o'clock. I can't believe that. We haven't had time for much of a debate. But the Buster Keaton film, 1 week, is available on YouTube. So you might want to go away and have a look with the sound and see it all and just see what you make of it. Okay. Okay. So summer task. This is to either select an extract from a film of your choosing and write an analysis of it. So try to include things like shot types, editing, and mise en scène. So literally everything that's in the frame. Okay, so the setting, the props, the costume, the lighting. Or you could choose to search one of the following directors: Martin Scorsese, Lynn Ramsey, Quentin Tarantino, Catherine Bigelow, or Ken Loach. And then write an essay explaining the director's style. So you'd aim to watch at least 2 films by that director, and then think about, are there any recurring themes, meanings from the film? Do they have a particular style? Is there anything relevant about the context? And aim to write about 3 or 4 paragraphs. So just one task. Actually, it doesn't say either or, does it? Okay, yeah, aim for both, unless you're doing one brilliantly. Okay. Sorry, I said or, and that threw you, but actually it is both. Okay. And then my email address is at the top there. You can send those through, but we'll collect those in September. Myself and whoever I'm sharing year 12 with, I can't remember at the top of my head. So it is 12 o'clock. So I'm sorry if I've just kind of like rattled through that, but I hope you can see from today's session that this is a really kind of diverse subject where you'll get to use a lot of different skills. You'll get to have a lot of interesting discussions and debates, some great films on the spec. And I really, really hope that you join us in September. Okay, are there any questions before I finish? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for contributing so brilliantly, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. If you're football fans out there, I'm sure you're already enjoying it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, well, hopefully all of you in September. All right, guys, I'm going to stop recording there, and thank you very, very much for your time today, and look after yourselves, everyone. Thank you. Bye.